Life asked Death.
Why did people love me but hated the idea of you?
Death responded.
Because you were a beautiful lie, and I am the painful truth.
The world grew smaller with every second that passed, unable to force yourself back down with gravity alone. The vortex sucked you into its maw, spinning in the air while your limbs flailed, hoping to grab hold of anything to keep you from floating into the abyss. Every piece of debris smashed into your limbs and collided into your body, pushing you further into the void. The cry of Ground Zero, Katsuki Bakugou, sped towards the sky amongst the chaos of the cityscape, reaching out for your outstretched hand with a mighty grip. Fighting against the vacuum, his arm hooked the rail of a skyscraper, holding you in place while he felt the pull of the void continue to suck you in. Bakugou fought against this powerful force, pulled his weight and yours back towards the rooftop, gritting his teeth and feeling his muscles strain.
Katsuki!
You yelled, gripping onto his gloves.
Don't let go, lightweight!
He yelled back, still pulling as best as he could. Whatever power gripped onto you, it continued to keep its hold, feeling his shoulders almost tear at their seams. The railing suddenly bent from the pressure, tearing from its bolts and jolting Bakugou's grip on you, slipping through his gloves. He grunted while his arms still held on, but no matter how hard he tried, this force overwhelmed his own.
God damn it!
He cried between his teeth, his hand clutching onto yours tightly that his fingers grew numb. The railing continued to bend out of shape, its structure weakening from the strength of the abyss above. Bakugou's hand began to slip. His eyes glanced at the railing before it gave in from the vacuum, tearing from the concrete of the skyscraper's rooftop. His gloves slipped, his grip gone, flying with you in the air until... The crushing sound of stone echoed before a large hardened hand grabbed hold of Bakugou's, violently halting both you and him from flying into the dark abyss above. His feet planted into the skyscraper's infrastructure. Bakugou's eyes widened in surprise, while the roar of the vacuum rushed against his ears.
Kirishima!
He yelled, eyeing the redhead with his feet dug into the concrete.
I got you, Bakugou!
He cried, his large hardened hands gripping tightly on Bakugou's wrist. He was an anchor, watching the two heroes whip in the air while he pulled against the force of the vacuum. He felt the prick of tears in his eyes, ignoring their existence in his aid.
Katsuki!
You yelled with tears of your own, your hand slipping within Bakugou's.
Shut up, lightweight!
He reprimanded, gripping tighter. A sudden jolt traveled through the chain of hands, finding Kirishima's feet dragged along the concrete. The weight was too great for Kirishima to hold and anchor all of you. The fear crawled through your spine, feeling your tears spill harder than ever. Bakugou still held steadfast onto your hand, feeling your wedding band sear into his skin. He never stopped pulling you back towards him, only to feel the jolt again from the inertia of the vacuum into the massive vortex above. His grip was slipping.
No! Don't let go!
He cried, his eyes on you.
I won't let you go!
It felt like a moment, a second in time, where the twinkle of your ring caught your eye in front of Bakugou's pained stare. His eyes pricked with the twinkle of tears, fueled by fear. It was what you felt, and he was the same. His eyes were the last thing you held on to, before the touch of your fingers slid from his, feeling your ring slip from them. All you could hear was the roar of the vacuum. Watching Bakugou's red pupils shrink, you watched him yell and scream while his body jerked into Kirishima's hold, pulling him away from you and clutching onto him through his rage-induced cry. All you could do was stare into his mournful gaze, until the dark consumed you whole. The world grew dark in a moment's notice, laying in the warmth of Midoriya's arm who cradled your head. The pain had already subsided, yet you no longer could see his face, only feel his touch. You choked on your saliva and blood with every breath you took, feeling your lungs burn in your chest. You wished you could have seen his face one last time. Izuku Midoriya held on to you, feeling your body tremble with every breath you took, each one growing weaker. He had cleared the area of these malformed creatures, but he was too late, while he held onto your body, growing heavier and colder. He held back tears, feeling the overwhelming sense of guilt and fear until he couldn't force them back. You felt his tears upon your face, heard his hiccups and gasps while he too trembled, racked with sadness.
Midoriya!
Called Todoroki from afar, catching his ear.
Midoriya!
The ground shook momentarily while the fight continued on. Midoriya watched everything unfold, finding his friends and comrades still holding on, yet he saw the despair, heard the cries, and felt the hole in his heart continue to gape open, as large as the hole in the sky.
Go!
You whispered, spluttering, while your hand aimlessly reached out into the air.
Help him.
Midoriya stared at your misguided hand, slowly clutching onto the air until he grabbed hold of it in his. He eyed your wedding band, tightening his grip onto your fingers.
I can't leave you.
He snapped before he held it close to his chest.
I need to get you to a medical unit.
Help him, please.
You spoke with a quivering lip, feeling the sting in your eyes where tears should be. All Midoriya saw was the viscous tears of blood that slowly streamed onto your cheeks.
I'll be fine, Deku.
Don't call me that. Not now.
He ordered before he roughly grabbed hold of your shoulders.
I'm taking you with me.
You heaved from his grip, while the pulsating throb inside your chest ricocheted a wave of nauseating pain. You coughed, spluttered, feeling the drowning sensation in your burning lungs. But the touch of his skin, his fingers, his arms carrying you effortlessly from the ground was all that mattered. Your breath sharpened, fading lighter with each heave. Your body was failing, yet the sway of Midoriya's sprint lulled you further into slumber.
Izuku.
You breathed, feeling his grip tighten. The darkness dispersed before a searing sensation gripped upon your skin. It grew silent, hearing only the distant cry of Deku fade away from your ears.
Shouto.
You whispered through bated breaths, your lungs sharply taking in every one while you laid in his lap. He hushed you softly, while his hands flickered with bursts of flame, praying that his heat would help stop your trembling. Shouto Todoroki held you close to his chest, trying to give as much of his body heat onto you, drenched and clammy while your skin was incredibly pale. With the help of Midoriya, you cleared the streets, only to exert too much of your quirk, sending a wave of tsunami proportions into the horde. However, he turned to find walls of ice surrounding the both of you, a phenomena that you had successfully executed, freezing the giant waves and entrapping the horde within its icy confines. Todoroki reached for you too late, feeling no warmth on your skin and only welcomed by the chill in your breath.
Midoriya!
He yelled into the distance, his voice echoing against the icy walls of the street.
Midoriya!
The street shook with a mighty, thunderous boom, of which caused part of the street to collapse ahead. Todoroki clutched onto your body, peering through his long locks to spot a figure emerge from the sinkhole. Red hair caught his eye, finding Kirishima shooting towards the sky before the street caved in before him. You nestled into Todoroki's chest, feeling his breath heave in and out, and the beat of his heart next to your ear. You slowly clutched your fingers onto his uniform while your breath began to slow, feeling lighter in his arms.
Shouto.
You whispered softly, your head growing heavy and your fingers slowly losing their strength. Todoroki gripped onto you, pulling you into his embrace while he lit his hands once more, keeping the warmth close to your chest.
Love, stay with me. Stay awake. Don't fall asleep.
He ordered, drawing your body upright and cradling you in his arms.
I'm so tired.
You murmured, nestling your head into his neck.
I know you are, but please, stay awake for me.
Flames erupted from Todoroki's hand, growing brighter and illuminating the crystal walls around him. Your eyes peered into the warmth, finding flames burst from his scar while they licked your skin. It was cold still, feeling your eyelids force themselves shut from exhaustion.
I'm sorry.
You whispered, earning a small whisper from him before he clutched onto you, holding you dear.
That I can't.
Your voice grew weak, while your cold breath collided with Todoroki's flames. He still kept you close to his heat, inwardly hoping it would bring you back. But you felt your breath grow shallow, your body tired, and no longer with the strength to speak. You reached your hand to graze against Todoroki's scar, your fingers brushing through the bright orange flames that danced on your skin, unperturbed by the crackle and heat. The flames licked against your ring, that split from the ice that frosted its surface.
Keep your promise.
You whispered, your fingertips dragging along his scar, before you exhaled deeply. A distant mournful cry caught Todoroki's ear, spotting shards of green light fissure and disperse across the street. In an instant, his flames grew while he held you tightly against his body, watching Midoriya from afar, manic and rageful while holding his spouse in his arms. Despite his flames engulfing his body, Todoroki grabbed the back of your head, feeling his tears stream down his cheek, evaporating from the heat he refused to rebuke. He felt no movement. He heard no breath. He only felt the chill of your skin that persisted. Todoroki's choked cry muffled against the crook of your neck, holding your body close to his, clutching his fingers into your skin. The crumbling gravel and dust settled in the confines of the room, broken and in disarray. Denki Kaminari's hands cautiously reached out towards the gnarled, misshapen bars of the cage that sat along the back wall, spotting your exhausted body laying haphazardly on the floor. He felt the prick of something against his skin, electrifying yet not of his making on his approach. He wondered if this was what it must feel like to be shocked, the tingling sensation rippling along his hand the closer he reached out. Grabbing a hold of you, he pulled you up on his shoulders, feeling the static tingle every so often from your body.
No, everything is my fault.
You spoke with a rasp, your body heavy.
Don't say that. Come on. We can still get out of here.
Reassured Kaminari as he carried you away from the large cage. The room crumbled while the earth shook with the distant roar of destruction outside, causing Kaminari to trip on his feet every so often. He gripped on your wrists to hold you from falling, clutched on your waist to keep you tight to him. So tired. You felt so tired of everything. Your body failed to stand on its own feet, and your lungs grew weaker with every breath. You were exhausted. Yet a glance into Kaminari's eyes hidden behind his shades pricked a twinge of guilt. His eyes looked onwards towards the sunlight outside of the dark, still determined to carry you out from the imprisonment you suffered. He wanted nothing more but to take you outside with him, into the fresh air, despite the world crumbling around. That prick of energy still danced against his skin from your body, leaning against his. It was warm with every touch against his hands. You too felt the same, feeling the world slip away from under your feet as if you were floating, and yet your body wanted nothing more but to lay on the earth. The shuffle of Kaminari's hands heaved you up onto your feet before he swept you up, his arms carrying you into his chest. That electrifying energy crashed against your bodies, pricking at Kaminari and stinging his chest. He ignored this though, still moving onwards towards the broken walls.
We're almost there.
He spoke.
Keep talking to me.
Your head laid against his shoulder with your arms around his neck, but the effort was too great. You felt your muscles slowly lose strength, gripping tighter into his jacket to keep you upright. You needn't see what transpired outside. That vortex, that black hole was your doing, as were the poor souls that were caught in the crossfire, now transformed into horrific, ghastly creatures. All of your energy was spent, while you cried into Kaminari's chest.
Mon ange?
Spoke Kaminari, slightly light-hearted in tone.
I love you. And that is the beginning and end of everything.
Through your tears, a smile tugged at your lips while you heaved yourself to reach his ear. The electrical charge between the both of you crackled and dispersed, eyeing your hands slowly disintegrating into flakes of dust and decay. You chuckled, pouring tears of guilt and an overwhelming sadness, but not without understanding this warm and comforting feeling that brewed in your heart.
Thank you for setting me free, Charge Bolt.
You whispered into his ear, watching your hands fall apart. Kaminari was witness to your body slowly falling apart, gently being taken by the wind as if you were as delicate as leaves. He caught his breath in his lungs, unable to accept this sight while your arms began to break away. Your touch, your weight, your presence, all began to lighten in his arms.
You are the most finest, loveliest, and most beautiful person I have ever known. And even that is an understatement.
You rasped. You heard Kaminari's breath hitch, refusing to cry tears while he watched the dust crumble on your person.
Merci, Denki.
You whispered weakly, laying your head against his shoulder before you felt as light as the air itself. All went silent. The roar of the world disappeared from your ears, as did you from Kaminari's arms, in a flurry of paper-thin flakes and dust. He stood there, arms empty with the remaining tingle of charge that resonated from you still coursing across his skin. He gritted his teeth, now unable to hold back the anger and the guilt before he cried into the air, sending a large surge of electricity through the room, discharging throughout and shocking all that stood in his way. You heaved and pushed against the concrete with the little strength you had left, but with one arm still intact, you barely had a chance. The cave-in was a means to an end, throwing your quirk to stop any more enemies from reaching the surface. The subway was now clear, at least from where you laid. The curdled, ghostly cries of these monsters grew silent, only hearing the crumbled debris and the shifting movement of the subway's now broken infrastructure.
Thumper!
Yelled Eijirou Kirishima on approach, immediately grabbing hold of the large piece of concrete that trapped your legs. You pushed with him, only budging the asphalt a few inches before it lodged itself again amongst the debris, trapping your legs once more. The more you stared at the blood, the more you felt.
I can't feel my legs.
You spoke, leaning against your only limb, eyeing the other dislocated next to you. You felt the sharp pain pierce through it, as if someone had stabbed you with a knife.
Where's Ruka when you need her?
Mumbled Kirishima through his teeth, gritting them with every pull of his arms. His arms and hands hardened with every tug, growing larger in mass while he exerted all of his strength. You stared into the sky, watching the vortex encircle the city above with its deep, dark maw swallowing the sky whole. You felt faint, exhausted, weary, before you spotted two figures above, caught in the maelstrom that threatened to consume the city.
Help, Bakugou!
You spoke, turning to Kirishima.
Not without you!
He yelled, still struggling to lift the now lodged piece of street that trapped you under. Suddenly that ghostly curdle caught your ear, turning to find a few of the monsters pulling themselves from the rubble. They too struggled, but with every push they clawed from the crumbled debris, their hiss echoing in the broken subway. With a heave of your body, you grabbed Kirishima's hardened arm, halting his attempts with his red eyes now on you.
Help him!
You ordered.
I'll hold these bastards back!
Kirishima grunted in disapproval, returning to his objective, freeing you with another heave with his arms. You turned towards the creatures, their bodies languidly crawling and creeping closer.
I'm sorry,
you piped before you swung your free and only movable arm towards a crumbling pillar in the distance, the sonic boom resonating through the subway until it destroyed its foundation. The roof began to cave in, crushing those further away until it traveled towards your vicinity. Kirishima's eyes widened before he stared into yours, having accepted what fate had dealt you, broken and trapped. You offered your hand to him with a smile, that bright smile against the shadows of the creatures that drew near from behind.
I'll give you a boost,
you uttered, holding back tears.
Help Ground Zero. Red Riot.
The subway cavern trembled from the cave-in, edging closer towards you before Kirishima, gritting his teeth with anger, stepped away. With a running leap, he aimed for your swinging arm, propelled by your sonic boom towards the sunlight above. You watched his back while he escaped the crumbling subway, smiling at his fleeting form before the light was consumed by the dark.
Bye, Eijirou.
Kirishima did not look back, his eyes stinging with tears, while he heard the cave-in collapse below. Hanta Sero caught his breath, pulling his helmet off to free himself from its destroyed glass. It was useless at this point, finding it almost caved in. It didn't stop the nauseating feeling in his head and his stomach, that feeling of inertia that swirled around and ceased to halt. You stood by him, eyeing his body for any injuries to find none on him. Good. You hoped as much, yet you spotted his eyes on you, widening in shock and utter terror.
Why the long face, Bucky?
You teased with a grin.
It's like we won't bump into each other like this again.
A weak chuckle escaped your throat that soon filled with a viscous liquid, coughing out blood before you collapsed onto the floor. Sero rushed towards you, albeit in a staggered swagger of his feet. He crawled to find a pool of blood seeping through the ripped flesh from your back. His hands tried to press into the large wound, only finding no way of stopping it, staring at his hands now painted red.
Hey! Why the hell did you do that?
He reprimanded, his eyes darting around for anything to help stop the bleeding. The vertigo still swam in his head, trying to shake it.
It was either your body or your head,
you weakly replied.
And your helmet helped.
You spluttered, now feeling the rush of pain that throbbed in your back. Yet all the same, it felt numb, your fingers and toes tingling like a million needles pricking inside. You felt it harder to breathe, easing your breath every time to save you from the sting that shot through your lungs. That roar from above echoed menacingly across the sky. It caught Sero's attention while he stared up at the dark clouds that encircled the black hole. He had a view of the city from up high, taken far away from the firing line to witness everything. Bakugou's rescue attempt with Kirishima, Midoriya's sudden spike of energy, Todoroki's flames, and then Kaminari's burst of electricity, shocking those from the warehouse where he was not too long ago. It all happened in a moment.
I need to take you to our med unit,
stated Sero while he attempted to lift you from the floor.
Don't fucking
Stop being stubborn!
Sero!
He stopped, still holding on to you while you heaved and breathed through your gritted teeth. It began to feel cold, trembling in his arms while that hunger that haunted you for years began to wane.
You're safe. That's all that matters.
You whispered through bated breath.
I still need to get you help.
He reprimanded, his hand still attempting to stop the bleeding with tape.
You know what I like the most about you?
You asked, your tired eyes staring up at Sero.
That charm and flair. Not like some people who put on a show. You're genuine.
Stop it.
Why?
Because you're not going to die on me,
yelled Sero in frustration.
You have a score to settle, remember? With that doctor, that general, whatever she is, I'm not going to let you go.
You gazed into Sero's angry and tearful eyes while he continued to wrap tape around the wound, hoping it would halt the bleeding that profusely continued to pour. That determination and stubbornness was a part of him as well. Yet you smiled, even chuckled at the slightest thought and fancy of what ifs and what could have been.
You know, I thought one would have been enough.
You commented while watching Sero's frantic urgency.
One what?
He questioned, still focused on your gaping wound.
Little cub of our own.
Sero stopped again, his heart seized in his chest upon those words you uttered from your lips. Those tears he tried to hold back flooded in streams, silent in their springing to life that he stared ahead at the pool of blood you laid in. A weak chuckle caught his ear, his eyes on yours now, almost lifeless, your skin pale as a ghost.
That caught your attention.
You spoke with a weak smile.
But I really mean it. If we had a girl, I'd name them Cho. A boy would be Sho.
Sero only stared into your smiling eyes, now dulled by the very little life you held on to. All he did was smile through his tears, chuckling through the hiccups he had while he tried to accept the inevitable.
Not so imaginative, aren't you?
He joked, or at least he tried, with tears streaming down his cheeks. That smile of yours pulled higher in response, yet your breath grew shorter, soon growing silent until your eyes stared vacantly into the sky, laying in Sero's lap. Covered and painted in red, Sero held you in his arms, cradling your body now cold and lifeless while the sky roared and boomed across the city.
I love you, Tesoro.
The white silent room surrounded Hitoshi Shinsou for miles in every direction and corner, standing before you while you smiled at him. He noticed flashes of images above, some glimpses of moments, others distorted and skewed. Something was off in this mind palace of yours while you stood before him, still smiling until the cross look on his face brought upon a guilt that weighed heavily on you.
Why did you do it?
He asked, angry and confused.
I had to try.
You replied, your eyes downcast.
I guess it wasn't good enough.
You didn't have to risk your life for that guy.
I didn't do it for him. I did it for you.
Shinsou's anger flared with disgust at the thought of your involvement with the man who had started this catastrophe. He watched the flashes of memories dance around the white space, each one echoing moments the both of you had shared for years. Voices he had not heard for years. Words already spoken that resonated with his heart and soul. Caught unaware, he felt your tender fingers on his cheek, cradling it in your palm while your smile returned.
I love you. You know that, right?
You quietly spoke, your fingers trailing across his cheek before he cupped them in his palm. Your fingers felt cold to the touch, eyeing the white space breaking into pieces, shards of black shattering the space. And then your nose began to spring blood, the liquid viscously trailing against your skin.
I can feel it.
You uttered with fingers clutching onto Shinsou.
No. Let me go from here.
He ordered, watching the white room fall apart.
Let me find the medical unit.
He budged only to feel your hands on his face, holding his eyes on you while you gently caressed his skin. You stared into his exhausted violets, feeling the overwhelming sadness surge through the room.
I'd rather spend a few minutes here with you.
You reassured with a sad smile.
I want to remember you.
Kitten, let me go,
barked Shinsou, his hands clutching onto yours that refused to release. The room grew darker, shattering into pieces while the images disappeared, one by one. Shinsou stared at the necklace that was still hanging by your neck, the glow of the amber cat's eye dimming slowly into a dull orange hue.
I love you, Hitoshi. Goodbye.
The room engulfed in darkness before you disappeared, shattered amongst the memories that no longer flickered. Then silence. Shinsou inhaled sharply, finding himself amidst the chaos and the destruction that shook the foundations of Musatafu. The sky, though filled with an empty void, was alit with the sparks, flames, and devastation that left the wake of his friends, crying in despair. He felt it in his gut and his bones that lives were lost, feeling a heavy weight still lay on his lap. You laid lifeless with a smile on your face marred by the trickles of blood that ran from your nose. Though disheveled, you looked at peace, a quiet and still piece of life frozen in time. Shinsou held back this overwhelming rage, his fingers gripping onto your arms while he swallowed you in his embrace. He ignored the cries he heard across the destroyed streets and the cacophony of the sky bellowing above. His focus centered on you, still in his arms, no longer taking breath.
Kitten, come back to me,
he uttered quietly, his shoulders trembling and his fingers digging into you. The sky grew darker, expanding across the city to swallow it whole. The pool of it tugged at Shinsou's clothes, noticing debris levitating towards the vortex. Musatafu was lost, as was he.
Don't leave me. Come back. Come back.
Nothing but the roar of the sky swallowed his words, before the world turned dark. dust and sand, ice and snow. Particles and elements of debris danced in the wind whilst a man sat alone amongst the dunes that cascaded every so often in the distance. He sat amongst the roots of an ashen tree that stood against the sand and ice, the heat and chill, proudly reaching its branches towards the star-littered sky lit by an ethereal orange glow. His golden eyes strayed towards the sky, watching the stars drift and move around him, their patterns visible for him to observe. The landscape changed shape, every hour, on the hour, like it has done for many millennia before his time, trapped in a cycle he could not escape. Yet the tumultuous sands violently twisted, turning black against the gold in an infectious spill of grains.
Not again.
He murmured while he pulled the pocket watch from his long tattered coat, watching its hands tick away on its rusted and dirtied face. The sands grew darker, painted black in the wind before the man stood to his feet, making his way towards the infection in this empty plane of existence. He watched the black reveal small trails of light, a vibrant and blinding red that danced amongst the grainy black sea of sand and ice. He began counting, finding 7 before they flew towards him, encircling around his person, before they trailed towards the pocket watch in his hands, orbiting around it.
Do something!
Spoke a familiar and chirpy voice from behind, eyeing a young man who trekked with him across the dunes.
You could easily pluck one string away from that chaos, if you wanted.
The broody man ignored him while he stared at the violent sea, walking closer towards the black with every step crunching against the sand beneath his feet.
Come on, now's not the time to start ignoring me.
Teased the young man behind him, pulling at his suspenders before he caught up to the broodier man ahead.
You know you have the ability, if not the power, to change this. That wasn't the deal.
Slowly replied the broody man, his large fox-like ears lowering in disdain.
No, forget the deal.
Chirped the young man, smiling widely.
How many cycles are you going to create until someone takes care of the problem? I'm not listening to you. Fine. Don't listen to the last shred of humanity you have left. It's not like I don't mind. Pan.
Pan clutched onto the pocket watch, his hands shaking in anger and frustration, while the warmth of the string still orbited around his wrist. It still ticked in his palm, bringing him some comfort. He eyed the landscape, spotting the dunes wash against the starry backdrop, before he focused on a point towards the east of the black sand that swirled in the mix.
I mean, that thing is getting heavy, isn't it?
Piped that voice again.
Wouldn't you feel better to just let it go? Shut up.
Snapped Pan.
This thing is the last thing I have left of.
He stared into the green eyes of the man he threatened, staring into those smiling eyes that once belonged to him. He sneered, returning back to the task at hand while he maneuvered the sands to create another entry point, somewhere in time before the catastrophe, before their mistakes, prepping for their journey to return to another point in time.
How do you know he still exists?
Asked the man behind him, now peeking out from the ashen tree with a more concerned look on his face.
What if you're wrong?
Pan's tired, golden eyes stared into the man's green ones, scoffing at the sight of him. He knew he had a tendency to appear wherever he wanted without warning, but over the years, however long it has been, he strangely grew acquainted with this spontaneity. Pan raised the mechanical pocket watch in his hands, eyeing the strings still orbiting around him, each one enriched with the life they held, still holding on.
A promise is a promise,
he simply replied with a sneer. From the black erupted a strong force of energy that bubbled from the poison. A kaleidoscope of color hit Pan's senses. Warm, tumultuous, and passionate, painted with despair that soared into the air. He had felt it many times before, the heavy burden striking his heart with a thunderous crash. It was the price he paid for his promise. To carry the broken and the shattered, to feel every end before a new beginning. Something he had become oddly and unashamedly acquainted with, knowing that he was aiding the work and duties of the last architect.
Take them home. Take them back,
he commented while he guided the strings towards the east, their fraying light floating gently back into the dunes. As soon as those strings were taken by the golden sea, the sadness and despair that erupted from the black dissipated into the wind. With it, it took the grains of black, no longer existing in this plane of eternal loneliness. A new time had come, another moment to repeat and restart once more. Pan watched the strings leave the pocket watch in his hands, finding the last of them disappear into the golden dunes. It was silent once more. Dust and sand, ice and snow. Pan stared ahead at nothing once more, turning to those green eyes by the ashen tree. The man only smiled, leaning casually against its trunk before Pan's eyes stared past him, spotting the familiar large sea of black to the south, a region poisoned beyond repair. It boiled, tossed and turned, its inky mass the cause of the infection amongst the dunes and upon the roots of the ashen tree. It alone had been present since he was marooned in this place, his mind splitting in twain. Literally.
I don't know how long I can stand talking to myself,
he uttered under his breath.